tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I'll put breath in you and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and when I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of Man, and say to it, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Come, breath from the four winds, and breathe into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, oh, our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I'll bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it, declares the Lord. You know, growing up, this was one of my favorite passages, because as you can imagine, to a little boy in Sunday school, like, this is awesome. You know, this is like, oh my gosh, it's like Walking Dead, but in the Bible, you know? It's like super cool. But as I have gotten older, and I look at this passage, it captivates me just as much. For example, this is one of the things I love about it. When you look at the context into which Ezekiel is speaking, because these are people of Israel who are in exile. This is to say that they were in their home in Jerusalem, and all of a sudden they were conquered and they were taken away to live in a foreign land in Babylon. Everything they knew, everything they loved, everything they had been hoping for, everything they could even plan or even thought they believed was in question and gone. And now they were living in a foreign land as the captured people of a defeated state. So as you can imagine, it's a very hopeless situation. And it wasn't just like exile just kind of happened. It wasn't like this surprised them. In fact, Israel had been living in the middle of a lot of turmoil very much prior to this point. You see, in the middle of Israel, what had been happening was that all these surrounding nations, Babylon, Assyria, Egypt, were at war. They're each trying to assert their dominance, trying to claim power over the other, and Israel right in the middle of it. And unfortunately, that brought into their world chaos, turmoil, competing ideologies, unfaithfulness, uncertainty. So, very plainly put, the world Israel lived in was chaotic, scary, and messy. But still, Israel had this one purpose, and it's been their purpose ever since they were formed, to be God's chosen people, to bring light into a dark world, to bring hope where there was no hope, to bring peace where there was no peace, to bring love where there was no love. This was their purpose, to partner with God in what he was going to do for all humanity. But does Israel do this? No, not at all. Very sad. And it is so sad to see. But you see, they had not fulfilled their purpose. They succumbed to the chaos that they had faced. They had given into the turmoil that surrounded them, and they engaged in this unfaithfulness. They were not faithful to Yahweh. They were unfaithful to the mission which he had given them. They weren't the blessing they were supposed to be. And they didn't move in hope-fueled action towards a world in need, no. They were dead in their calling. And that's what led to the exile, and that's what this valley of dry bones represented. The very people that were supposed to be the representation of a living and loving God in the middle of a chaotic and uncertain world, Israel had ceased to be. And it just got me thinking, as we look at Israel and we look in the context of our lives, as we, the new Israel, the people that God has called apart for his holy purpose of making the world new again, of letting a world that is so fueled by hate and disaster and chaos that there's a loving God calling them to something better. Are we living out the mission we've been given? Or are we just as dead as the bones of Israel? Because here's the thing. To say that we live in a chaotic world is an understatement. Like, check on that box, right? Like, I mean, all you have to do is turn on the world, and we have wars in Palestine and Israel. We have wars in Ukraine and Russia. We look within our own country, and there are two political parties so dedicated to hating each other that they forget to love just about anything. Then we look at our own city. that on this Murfreesboro Pike, that they're homeless, begging for food at every street corner. That just down the road there are neighborhoods where there are teenagers that will not live to get their high school diploma because gang violence and drug addiction will take them well before their time. That 8 minutes down the road there's a street called Broadway where every single night and at every single bar, hopeless people walk in hoping to find some kind of answer at the bottom of a bottle, and every single night they stagger out none the wiser. That we live in a world that has human trafficking is rampant, where women and children are exploited as if they are just common objects. We live in a world so filled with just despair and just anxiety that people resort to ideas of self-harm and even suicide as the only remedy for the pain that they feel every single day. So to say that we live in a chaotic world is an understatement. But are we bringing hope to it? Are we running in love with the message of a God that loves them and that can heal them? Are we running and speaking into that? The other day I was at my Coast Guard station. I serve at Station Oak Island in North Carolina. And I was talking with one of my friends. He's a lot older than me, and even though he's not a believer, in the service of the Coast Guard, he's dedicated his life to being on the front lines of much of what the world has done. Many of the things that scare us. And as we were talking about some of these things, the chaos, the things that make us uncertain, the things that scare us, the things we wish we had answers to, the unfaithfulness, he interrupted me. And he said, I'm not a religious man. He said, but I have a buddy who's the pastor of a church. And I walked in the doors of the church. I went to him, and I just asked him, at what point do you people feel like doing something? And then I left. That hit me very hard when he said that to me. But apparently even the unbelievers feel that we need to be more engaged with the hurt and chaos of our world. We have become just as these bones of Israel. But here's the good news. I don't mean to just drop something that heavy and run, because there's so much good news within this passage. And the good news is this, and it is only this. By the breath of the living and loving God, these dry bones can live again. It's so beautiful that by his command we can be brought back together, no longer broken, to resemble his kingdom. And that by his breath we can once again be sent out to the front lines of evil that our world faces and bring hope to it. And this is what I love about this passage, is that there's a little two-step process that God does here. That through the speech that he gives Ezekiel, the bones are no longer broken and dry, but they are brought back together to form the image that they were supposed to represent. But then it is by his breath that they are given motion. That they start to stand up. They start to resemble the force of Israel they were meant to be and had been. And you see, he did it in this passage, and this is what he needs to do with us. To not just raise us up to be, again, the image bearers, to be the resemblance